Is it getting deeper in the subject matter expertise? Is it getting, better and better as a communicator? And where's the proof of that? Right? Um, on the other hand, there's a bunch of celebrities, a hockey player, for example, football player. They spend their day job is playing football or hockey or whatever it happens to be. So that's fine. And then at night and weekends, they might speak, right? So in my particular case, it's an interesting one. Working with major organizations, helping them figure out how to scale their business, leading retreats, for example, executive retreats. I spend a lot of my time writing, right, and codifying the knowledge that I learned, working with a lot of these different clients, and then sharing those stories, those ideas, and everything in models from the stage, right? And it's kind of fun, right? Because it's grounded in real world. So it's really the intersection of those two, and to make sure that the kind of speaker that you want has got both of them. Because if you got both of them, you're golden. And if you only got one, you've got a bored audience or a bad beginning or ending of your conference itself. Can I just add one other thing to the question of why, why might it be so much why is the cost of a professional speaker so much? I said between 5 and 50. Okay. Why is it so much? I'm going to just point out that you're not actually paying for that 1 hour or so on stage, or even if the speaker spends the whole day, you're not paying for that. What you're paying for is an entire career's worth of knowledge that's been sifted and sorted and organized in a particular way, and then communicated in a very tight, concise, customized fashion, right? And the whole question of saying, we're paying for all that expertise, it's an interesting thing. How much are you paying your C-level executives, right? How much are you paying your senior team, right? Because what you're usually getting is somebody who's actually quite senior. And you want to make sure that there's, if you just look at it that way, usually there's a connection there. Usually the professional speakers are paid a lot less, to tell you the truth, but there's a connection. Um, I think there's also a misnomer about, gee, all of a sudden you show up and all of a sudden you're just golden on a stage. No, that's not the way it works. Yes, all of the R&D, all of the professional development that you have to make sure that you're current, okay, takes time. All the professional development that you do to make sure that you're an excellent communicator and truly at the top of your game, that takes time, right? But once a client engages you, there's a huge amount of preparation, all the research, all the time spent in their discussion groups and the industry discussion groups, all the interviews with the audience, the customization of the presentation, any of the review, the meetings back and forth, the rehearsal, um, the sound checks, the time on site, the follow-up afterwards, the creation of all of the customized resources that you might put together. If you've got a portal that you could load those things, all that technology, putting that on stage, there's actually a lot of work that actually goes through. I'm sure that if somebody called me and said, tomorrow, Randall, can you speak on the topic of business growth or marketing strategy or thought leadership or any of those kinds of things? Of course, I can actually quote do it tomorrow. But that's very, very high risk because without all of that preparation and the interviews and the research and everything, the presentation is going to be a generic one. So understanding what kind of prep is that a speaker actually does is actually critical to making sure that you're not going to get just a generic presentation, but you're going to get one that takes all of that speaker's deep, deep, deep knowledge and expertise and puts it into the context and through the lens of what's going to make a difference to the audience to get them to actually take that next step. And that's the real challenge, right? And that's the real job. And it's fun. It's never the same.
Randall, you are a longtime member of CAPS, the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and the NSA, the National Speakers Association, the American equivalent. You mentioned to me just this week that you would say 25% of the learning there is related to the art of speaking, but the bulk of the learning is really, the speaking industry. And you're talking about some of the things you do to make sure it's really a quality experience, the interviews in advance, research in discussion boards, getting to know people, showing up in advance, interview, all the things that we know that we do. Are these the best practices that everybody at CAPS and NSA are doing? Like if everyone is learning the same best practices, it's like a similar experience with everybody there?
Um, you know something, I think everybody has their own standards of how they want to apply it in their particular in their particular business, right? So for me, I came from industry. I was a senior executive at a public company, right? I had certain standards of what I expected from people that worked with us, and I feel that I need to sort of step up to it. I think you also any association worth its salt offers all kinds of opportunities for its members to level up, right? To learn more, and so that doesn't mean that everybody who's a member of an association actually takes advantage of those things. I'm actually a chartered financial analyst, a CFA. And, I got that designation much, much earlier in my career, right? It comes in handy, certainly when I'm working with financial services clients. It comes in handy working with anybody in the investment industry. Most people would have no idea what it is, what it is. But I'm not involved intimately in that professional associations, the CFA, um, association. Not at all, right? I get the newsletters, I read everything, I try and keep myself up to date on financial, you know, and portfolio management and analysis and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not engaged in that, right? The opportunity is offered to me, but I'm not taking up on it. In terms of what I've learned at NSA and at CAPS and everything, um, you know, when I first started speaking after a long time career as a management consultant, um, I had no idea about what might be the best practice in terms of the number of interviews we might do. I had no idea, for example, about how I could do the, you know, uh, put together a suite of resources that would actually make a difference, and sort of extend the learning beyond sort of my keynote. I didn't know some of those things existed. And then all of a sudden I thought, okay, well, I can do that. So I come up with a whole bunch of stuff that I think would make a difference. And it did. However, then I looked at some of my professional speakers, colleagues, and they did different things. And I thought, maybe I can take some of those ideas and incorporate it into mine. Once again, opportunity presents itself, but you also have to take that opportunity to make a difference, right? So I think the advantage of hiring somebody who's a member of NSA or CAPS is, there's ethical standards on one hand, right? Certainly if somebody's got a CSP or is a Hall of Fame, there's that as well. But I think that, the question of what are the best practices, a great example is a number of years ago when we had that COVID thing. All of a sudden, the question is, how do you actually deliver presentations from in a virtual environment? I love tech, but frankly, I didn't know about all the video production gear that I would need. I didn't know what kind of cameras and how many cameras and where they should be placed, and I could just grab over my mic right now and what kind of mic to get and different ways of engaging when you're on Zoom, or how to use a moderator or back channel person to help. Like all those kinds of things were actually new. So being a member of a group that where people are able to share all the things that work for them, it meant that the actual client experience when dealing with me when asked to do a virtual presentation or a virtual facilitation for that matter, they got a vastly greater experience than if somebody was not a member of these organizations. So, it's I think it's worthwhile, but once again, not everybody takes the opportunity once given them, right? Some people say, "Oh, that's a neat idea," but they never actually do it, right? And that's why due diligence with a prospective speaker is just so important.
Randall, you mentioned your colleague who negotiated the vacation for her family in lieu of big ticket price for her services. Do you want to share possibly some other pricing or negotiation strategies that people trying to source or hire a keynote speaker might want to consider?
Yeah, so what I would say is this. You need to make sure that your budget is right size, but when there is a gap, okay, some speakers do have a certain degree of flexibility. It's challenging because, if it's 12,000, 18,000, well, from the speakers bureau, and you're undercutting the speakers bureau, there's no fee integrity. And you have to have some degree of integrity. Otherwise, it doesn't work for anybody, right? So putting that aside, most speakers do have some degree of flexibility, and the flexibility is essentially how do we trade value for value? So for example, that one colleague who traded for a all expenses paid vacation for her entire family. I've in my decades of doing this, that was the only time I've heard somebody do that. I'm sure other people have done it. I've not done that myself, but I have done some other things. What I would suggest is this. You go back to first principle. As a meeting planner, you go back to first principle. What is the problem you're looking to solve? The problem isn't we need to fill the speaker slot. It's more about we need to move the audience from point A to point B. And as a result of that, what will hiring a particular speaker do to make that actually happen? And when there's a gap on the budget, maybe there's some more things that the speaker can actually do to actually move that needle and help you achieve the objectives in a way that you might not have thought of. Here's some ideas. It could very well be that the speaker has a bunch of books. Maybe you arrange for a copy of the book for everybody. Because the cost of the books for the speaker might be less, for example, than the cost of that you'd have to pay if you bought the books bulk from Amazon, right? You might be able to get a deal. It becomes a win-win. Everybody gets something. Maybe, and this is a little bit more current. Maybe the speaker's got a bunch of online training programs. Maybe there's a way to provide access to those training programs for everybody in the audience, or at a reduced cost. And so once you think about certain value adds of that nature, the value of that um, comes out of a different budget sometimes than the actual quote speaker budget. Maybe there's other resources that the speaker can provide. For example, some customized articles, designed to help achieve that particular goal. Maybe there's a way that you could use the speaker to goose up some of the sponsorship. Maybe, for example, you can um, have the speaker sit at a sponsor's table for lunch and auction off or raffle off access to that table. Maybe you could have the speaker sit, um, at a trade show vendor's booth, okay, to attract more people in to that particular vendor. Maybe you can actually get a vendor to defray part of the cost of the speaker. Maybe what you can do is you could ask the uh, the speaker if they would do a webinar version of their keynote, specifically designed for people who are not able to actually attend. Okay, or maybe do a webinar beforehand to give people a taste of what you'd be talking about, and to help sell attendance at the event. If the event costs $1,000 to attend, and you're able to sell 10, 15 more spots because people attended a webinar that the speaker agreed to do at perhaps even no cost beforehand, that pays for the speaker's entire fee, right? So there's all kinds of clever ways to actually bridge the gap between, called, gee, we only have a budget of 10, but your fee is 15. Okay. And it's a lot easier than you might imagine, but it involves having a speaker who says, I understand what the goals are. And if you want to achieve those goals, here's a bunch of other things that I might be able to throw in. Here's something that happens for me quite often. So I'm doing the keynote, and guess what? I've done a huge amount of research. All the interviews and the customization and the discussion groups and the Facebook groups and all the other kinds of stuff. So I've done all that kind of homework. And the client says, we're having our board meeting. Can you address the board and talk about how to use the concepts that you talk about in the keynote for the organization's purpose? Gee, we're having an executive meeting, and can you sort of do a bit of a roundtable just to have maybe an ask me anything with the executive team? Gee, can you do a breakout session on how to implement some of the ideas that you're talking about, or to get people more tightly tied to that idea or a related idea, right? Well, guess what? The work's already done. Okay, so the cost of doing that extra thing would be relatively low, or perhaps even no cost, right? So the whole issue of fee, on the other hand, if you say, well, our budget's only $2,000, um, well, for me, I'm probably not the right speaker. I don't know how you could bridge that gap, etc. But on the other hand, Maybe there is somebody who's just starting out, or a vendor who would do something for a low honorarium, right? But just be very careful. What's the goal of the actual event? And it always strikes me, just one other thing. What's the cost of a coffee and snack service, right? And you take a look at, say, a 500 person event, and it's call it $5 per person for coffee. Okay, that's $2,500 for coffee. And if you want a little bit of food, all of a sudden you're up to, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just for snacks, coffee and snacks. What if you were able to reduce the cost of that and say, people are not coming to the conference for coffee and snacks? Yeah, of course you're going to provide coffee and everything, but is there any way that you can do it in a cheap and cheerful way and move some of that money to the real reason why people are actually at the conference, right? Which is presumably to hear new ideas and to build greater relationships and be inspired, frankly. So that's always struck me as a funny kind of thing. And my job is to get on stage and make a big difference. It's not to scrutinize the budget line items and everything, but I always think that there's an interesting opportunity when you look outside the speaker budget, right?
Randall, what do the conference and retreat organizers and planning committees who hire the keynote speakers need to know to help their selected speaker be successful? Like, what are they maybe not aware of?
Sometimes on these committees are people that know the organization very well, but might not have been involved in the selection of a speaker in the first place. What I would say to that particular group is the best speakers will work with you. Okay, it's really a team effort. Everyone's aligned. We want a great conference. We want to make sure that, as a speaker, when we're on a stage, we're delivering stuff that's of great value. So here's this, you know. If you use your time, and there's only so many hours as a volunteer, for example, okay, to help the speaker understand what's new about what's important about the industry, right? This really helps. Call it the first set of interviews, if you will, right? And I think that makes a big difference, right? Because the more you know as a speaker, the greater you can customize it, right? So that's number one. Share your knowledge of the industry. Number two is connect the speaker with people who are representative audience members. Sometimes it's the most influential people. Sometimes it's some of the veterans who've been there a long time. Sometimes it's kind of the young Turks, the people who are young and up and comers, etc. Right? Sometimes it's a particularly important demographic, right? And just so that you're able to connect the speaker to all of those different um, constituencies will make a big difference. Most speakers will have a pre-event survey where we'll ask like a few dozen questions, and some of them seem very very silly, but they make a big difference. And so I've got one of those, of course, and ask questions everything from who spoke in prior years to the demographics of the group to a whole bunch of other, some mechanical things about, the precise timing and contact information and everything. And every question on a professional speaker's list is actually important. I'll give you an example. Why in the world would I care about who spoke last year? The answer is that likely I know them. And what I can do is I can call them up and I can say, talk to me about what it was like actually speaking at this event. Tell me about the types of people you met. Talk to me about any particular interesting research or customization that you did. Is there anything that you might have done differently in terms of your preparation with this particular client? Is there anything that you think that could um, that you spoke about that I might want to sort of reprise and give you credit for in front of the group? Last year when so and so spoke, he talked about such and such. She talked about this or that. Maybe I can make reference to that, right? And so every question has got something keyed to it in terms of the type of preparation that one might actually do. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think the other thing is to recognize that the best speakers will follow your process. Most speakers have got a process, so when somebody hires me to speak, I'll send an email saying thank you, and I'll give my bio and I'll give my the final description of the talk, and I'll talk about a whole bunch of other logistical things, about AV needs and so on and so forth, etc. And some organizations will write back and say, that's amazing. That's so helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Others will preempt me to it and say, we're so pleased to have you there. Okay, here's the portal. Can you please upload your bio? Can you please upload a photo? Can you please upload the description? Okay, so whatever your process is, as long as the speaker knows what it is, that way they're able to work with you in a very efficient way. And they you don't want somebody who's needy, right? So you want to make it so that it's easy to work with, that they can add value. I'd also say this, most professional speakers, certainly who've been around a long time, know a lot about what works and what doesn't at conferences, really cool things that they've seen others do that maybe you might consider. So a great question to ask a professional speaker, either before you've hired them or after, is what other ways do you think we might be able to engage our audience? What can we do to make this particular meeting, this particular event, stand out? Are there ways that you think that we haven't considered, given that you've seen our call to speakers, etc. And then all of a sudden you'll have all kinds of different ways of doing it. There's so many different formats that are exciting, they're new, right? And death by PowerPoint is kind of not one of them, right? And so by varying up the format of all the different things that you've got, um, it provides some really interesting engagement opportunities for the audience.
Many keynote selection committees have been helped by your insightful 10 questions for choosing a business growth speaker. Is there anything, I know we rounded a lot of the bases so far, anything else that stands out for you worth mentioning?
I think yeah, I'll talk about one thing that really bothers me. Okay. When somebody says, "Are you really a thought leader?" Or they say, "We're looking for a thought leader to present on such and such." I think that term thought leader is so misused. And you know, if we want to think of it, fine. Somebody's got expertise, somebody's an expert, and then there's a very small number of people who are thought leaders. And I think it's you want somebody who's a thought leader to be on your stage. You don't want somebody who just happens to have expertise or maybe becoming an expert, etc. And then the question becomes, you know, um, how do you tell? How do you tell? So for me, I don't call myself a thought leader, but I certainly have a lot of I certainly have got a lot of thought leadership content. Okay, so just as you want to take a look at their podcast, their blog, right? You want to take a look at their LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, etc. Google them. Google choosing a business growth speaker, see what happens. For me, I've got a weekly blog, I've got a podcast, I've got over 700 thoughtful articles, 71 white papers, over 180 video interviews. Um, People can check out my personal website, credentials website, randallcraig.com, or go to Brain Trust Professional Institute. There's a lot of thought leadership content there that actually the two of us created, Rania. Um, I do think that you take a look at all that and you say, gee, this person actually knows what they're talking about. Gee, there's a depth to this. Gee, they've been doing this for lots and lots of years. And as a result of that, maybe they've got that deep knowledge, right? I think that that's something that's really, really important, right? Look for yourself, check it out for yourself. What is their body of work? Because if they're going to be on your stage and they're going to be talking about their body of work, that means nothing unless their body of work is delivered through the lens and context of what your audience needs and what your meeting objectives are. So number one, you got to have it, but number two, you've got to be able to customize it and everything. So let's just start at the very beginning and say, gee, does that person actually have it? Right? And not just, my particular case, I'm a Hall of Fame. I'm a fellow at CMC, FCMC. I've got a whole bunch of other awards and certifications and letters and everything like that. That's fine, but that's third-party recognition. But actually read the stuff yourself. Okay, watch the videos yourself and say, is this person's brain alive? Okay, do they have that depth? Might they actually be that thought leader that we're looking for? And I think that that makes a huge difference in terms of not just getting an academic, right? Who, these people are very deep, right? But somebody who might be able to take that, customize it, and then deliver it in a way that's motivating, gets people to take that first step, gets them open to those new ideas, right? And builds an alignment across a lot of people all at once. That's what we want. It's not just a question of thought leadership, it's a question about how that thought leadership makes a difference.
My last question, Randall. You talked about all those CAPS members, and NSA members learning and applying things differently and making things their own. And we talk with leaders and organizations all the time about corporate brand, personal brand. Tell us, Randall, I know you retract from advertorial content, but help us learn by example. What is it like working with Randall Craig?
I think I'll just say, number one, it's easy. I think this makes a difference whenever you choose a speaker. It's got to be easy. It's got to be fun. It's got to be, gee, I hadn't thought of that before. Oh, this is adding value. Gee, he's exceeded our expectations. Gee, we'll have him back. Gee, I think we wouldn't mind trying him not just as a keynote speaker, but maybe to facilitate an executive retreat. Gee, you know something? A lot of his learning materials is very relevant for our organization. We got a whole bunch of free stuff and we got a whole bunch of stuff that an organization can subscribe to. The training, the online training I'm talking about. But gee, getting that alignment is actually so important. And working with Randall, it's he's got the expertise, he's trusted, right? And he delivers value and he's so easy to work with, right? That's what I'd love people to say. And that's what, hey, check out my LinkedIn recommendations, right? Um, or ask for my speaker credentials sheet. And that becomes, see for yourself. See for yourself what other people say.
I concur. Thank you, Randall, for helping us to demystify the professional speaking industry and help us figure out how to hire that best fit speaker for us. And thank you to everyone who joined and listened in. We hope you learned something. If any of the issues we talked about resonate with you, if you're interested in having Randall keynote your next conference or speak at your next retreat, you can reach out to Randall Craig himself and get to know him. You can contact him at request@randallcraig.com or give him a call and he'll pick up the phone to have a chat. If you'd like to get the invites to our live monthly Q&A sessions for leaders, do email us at podcast@randallcraig.com. We'll put you on the list. And of course, we look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn.